that's the story of my life. I thought it would be easy at Cross Center for Innovation at Foothill College. I have a master's degree in health education from John F. Kennedy University, and I've been studying health and wellness for the last 25 years. So teachers and educators are some of my favorite people in the world, and frankly, y'all are some of the most hardworking and selfless people I know. So I just want to start out tonight by acknowledging that these last few months have probably been some of the hardest that you've ever experienced. And so what I really am hoping that you'll take away from tonight is just a brief respite from the world outside. So when I run these sessions, I always really want to emphasize that this is about you. For, you know, the next 45 minutes to an hour, you don't have to be anybody's teacher or anybody's spouse or anybody's parent or anybody's siblings. I just want you to take the time to focus 100% on you. And I'm gonna take my Princess Leia hair away and we're gonna get started. Okay, so I'm very glad you're here. I start out with the bad news first. So about 500,000 US teachers leave the profession every year. 41% leave the profession within 5 years of starting, and 66% of the nation's best teachers continue to leave the profession for careers elsewhere. I know these statistics are probably not surprising for you, and I'm guessing that after the last few months, they're probably gonna increase. And the reason is, studies have found that teaching is actually as stressful as working in an ER. 46% of teachers report high daily stress during the school year, and that's tied with nurses for the highest rate among occupational groups. So now that I've given you the bad news, let's start with something a little more fun. It's about 12 minutes, but trust me, it's worth it.
When I was 7 years old and my sister was just 5 years old, we were playing on top of a bunk bed. I was 2 years older than my sister at the time. I mean, I'm 2 years older than her now, but at the time that meant she had to do everything that I wanted to do, and I wanted to play war. So we were up on top of our bunk beds, and on one side of the bunk bed, I had put out all my G.I. Joe soldiers and weaponry, and on the other side were all my sister's Milos and ponies and ready for a cavalry charge. There are differing accounts of what actually happened that afternoon, but since my sister is not here with us today, let me tell you the true story, which is my sister is a little bit on the clumsy side, and somehow, without any help or push from her older brother at all, suddenly Amy disappeared off the top of the bunk bed and landed with this crash on the floor. And I nervously peered over the side of the bed to see what had befallen my fallen sister, and saw that she had landed painfully on her hands and knees on all fours on the ground. I was nervous because my parents had charged me with making sure that my sister and I played as safely and as quietly as possible. And seeing as how I had accidentally broken Amy's arm just 1 week before, heroically pushing her out of the way of an oncoming imaginary sniper bullet, for which I have yet to be thanked. I was trying as hard as I could. She didn't even see it coming. I was trying as hard as I could to be on my best behavior, and I saw my sister's face this wail of pain and suffering and surprise, threatening to erupt from her mouth and threatening to wake my parents from the long winter's nap for which they had settled. So I did the only thing my little frantic 7-year-old brain could think to do to avert this tragedy. If you have children, you've seen this hundreds of times before. I said, Amy, wait, don't cry, don't cry. Did you see how you landed? No human lands on all fours like that. Amy, I think this means you're a unicorn. Now that was cheating, because there's nothing in the world my sister would want more than not to be Amy the hurt 5-year-old little sister, but Amy the special unicorn. Of course, this was an option that was open to her brain at no point in the past. And you could see on my poor, manipulated sister's face conflict, as her little brain attempted to devote resources to feeling the pain and suffering surprise she just experienced, or contemplating her newfound identity as a unicorn. And the latter won out. Instead of crying, instead of ceasing our play, instead of waking my parents with all the negative consequences that would have ensued for me, instead, a smile spread across her face, and she scrambled right back up onto the bunk bed with all the grace of a baby unicorn, with one broken leg. What we stumbled across At this tender age of just 5 and 7, we had no idea at the time was something that was going to be at the vanguard of a scientific revolution occurring 2 decades later in the way that we look at the human brain. What we had stumbled across is something called positive psychology, which is the reason that I'm here today and the reason that I wake up every morning. When I first started talking about this research outside of academia, out with companies and schools, the very first thing they said to never do is to start your talk with a graph. The very first thing I wanted to do is start my talk with a graph. This graph looks boring, but this graph is the reason that I get excited and wake up every morning. And this graph doesn't even mean anything. It's fake data. What we found is if I got this data back sitting you here in the room, I would be thrilled because there's very clearly a trend that's going on there, and that means that I can get published, which is all that really matters. The fact that there's one weird red dot that's up above the curve, there's one weird in the room, you know who you are, I saw you earlier. That's no problem. That's no problem, as most of you know, because I can just delete that dot. I can delete that dot because that's clearly a measurement error, and we know that's a measurement error because it's messing up my data. So one of the very first things that we teach people in economics and statistics and business and psychology courses is how, in a statistically valid way, do we eliminate the weirdos? How do we eliminate the outliers? So that we can find the line of best fit, which is fantastic if I'm trying to find out how many Advil the average person should be taking, too. But if I'm interested in potential, if I'm interested in your potential or for happiness or productivity or energy or creativity, what we're doing is we're creating the cult of the average with science. If I ask a question like how fast can the child learn how to read in a classroom, scientists change the answer to how fast does the average child learn how to read in that classroom, and then we tailor the class right towards the average. Now, if you fall below the average on this curve, then psychologists get thrilled, because that means you're either depressed or you have a disorder, or hopefully both. We're hoping for both, because our business model is if you come into a therapy session with one problem, we want to make sure you leave knowing you have 10. So you'll keep coming back over and over again. We'll go back into your childhood if necessary, but eventually what we want to do is to make you normal again. But normal is merely average. And what I posit, and what positive psychology posits, is that if we study what is merely average, we will remain merely average. That instead of deleting those positive outliers, what I intentionally do is come into a population like this one and says, why? Why is it that some of you are so high above the curve in terms of your intellectual ability, athletic ability, musical ability, creativity, energy levels, your resiliency in the face of challenge, your sense of humor, whatever it is, instead of deleting you, what I want to do is study you. Because maybe we can glean information, not just how to move people up to the average, but how we can move the entire average up at our companies and schools worldwide. The reason this graph is important to me is when I turn on the news, it seems like the majority of the information is not positive. In fact, it's negative. Most of it's about murder, corruption, diseases, natural disasters, and very quickly, my brain starts to think that's the accurate ratio of negative to positive in the world. What that's doing is creating something called the medical school syndrome, which if you know people who have been to medical school during the first year of medical training, as you read through a list of all the symptoms and diseases that could happen, suddenly you realize you have all of them. I have a brother-in-law named Bobo, which is a whole nother story. Bobo married Amy the unicorn. Bobo called me on the phone from Yale Medical School. And Bobo said, Sean, I have leprosy. Which even at Yale is extraordinarily rare. But I had no idea how to console poor Bobo because he had just gotten over an entire week of menopause. See, what we're finding is it's not necessarily the reality that shapes us, but the lens through which your brain views the world that shapes your reality. And if we can change the lens, not only can we change your happiness, we can change every single educational and business outcome at the same time. When I applied to Harvard, I applied on a dare. I didn't expect to get in, and my family had no money for college. When I got a military scholarship 2 weeks later, they allowed me to go. Suddenly, something that wasn't even a possibility became a reality. When I went there, I assumed everyone else would see it as a privilege as well, that they'd be excited to be there. Even if you're in a classroom full of people smarter than you, you'd be happy just to be in that classroom, which is what I felt. But what I found there is while some people experienced that, when I graduated after my 4 years and then spent the next 8 years living in the dorms with the students, Harvard asked me to, wasn't that guy. But what happened, I was an officer of Harvard to counsel students through the difficult 4 years. And what I found in my research, my teaching, is that these students, no matter how happy they were with the original success of getting into the school, 2 weeks later, their brains were focused not on the privilege of being there, nor on their philosophy or their physics. Their brain was focused on the competition, the workload, the hassles, the stresses, the complaints. When I first went in there, I walked into the freshman dining hall, which is where my friends from Waco, Texas, which is where I grew up. I know some of you have heard of it. When they come to visit me, they look around, they say, this freshman dining hall looks like something out of Hogwarts from the movie Harry Potter, which it does. This is Hogwarts from the movie Harry Potter, and that's Harvard. And when they see this, they say, Sean, why do you waste your time studying happiness at Harvard? Seriously, what does a Harvard student possibly have to be unhappy about? Embedded within that question is the key to understanding the science of happiness, because what that question assumes is that our external world is predictive of our happiness levels, when in reality, if I know everything about your external world, I can only predict 10% of your long-term happiness. 90% of your long-term happiness is predicted not by the external world, but by the way your brain processes the world. And if we change it, if we change our formula for happiness and success, what we can do is change the way that we can then affect reality. What we found is that only 25% of job successes are predicted by IQ. 75% of job successes are predicted by your optimism levels, your social support, and your ability to see stress as a challenge instead of as a threat. I talked to a boarding school up in New England, probably the most prestigious boarding school, and they said, we already know that. So every year, instead of just teaching our students, we also have a wellness week, and we're so excited. Monday night, we have the world's leading expert coming in to speak about adolescent depression. Tuesday night is school violence and bullying. Wednesday night's eating disorders. Thursday night is illicit drug use. And Friday night, we're trying to decide between risky sex or happiness. I said that's most people's Friday nights. Which I'm glad you liked, but they did not like that at all. Silence on the phone. And into the silence, I said, I'd be happy to speak to your school, but just so you know, that's not a wellness week, that's a sickness week. What you've done is you've outlined all the negative things that can happen, but not talked about the positive. The absence of disease is not health. Here's how we get to health. We need to reverse the formula for happiness and success. In the past 3 years, I've traveled to 45 different countries, working with schools and companies in the midst of an economic downturn. And what I found is that most companies and schools follow a formula for success, which is this: if I work harder, I'll be more successful. And if I'm more successful, then I'll be happier. That undergirds most of our parenting styles, our managing styles, the way that we motivate our behavior. And the problem is it's scientifically broken and backwards for two reasons. First, every time your brain has a success, you just change the goalpost of what success looked like. You got good grades, now you have to get better grades. You got into a good school, now you get a better school. You got a good job, now you have to get a better job. You hit your sales target, we're gonna change your sales target. And if happiness is on the opposite side of success, your brain never gets there. What we've done is we pushed happiness over the cognitive horizon as a society. And that's because we think we have to be successful, then we'll be happier. But the real problem is our brains work in the opposite order. If you can raise somebody's level of positivity in the present, then their brain experiences what we now call a happiness advantage, which is your brain at positive performs significantly better than it does at negative, neutral, or stress. Your intelligence rises, your creativity rises, your energy levels rise. In fact, what we found is that every single business outcome improves. Your brain at positive is 31% more productive than your brain at negative, neutral, or stress. You're 37% better at sales. Doctors are 19% faster, more accurate at coming up with the correct diagnosis when positive instead of negative, neutral, or stress, which means we can reverse the formula. If we can find a way of becoming positive in the present, then our brains work even more successfully as we're able to work harder, faster, and more intelligently. What we need to be able to do is to reverse this formula so we can start to see what our brains are actually capable of. Because dopamine, which floods into your system when you're positive, has two functions. Not only does it make you happier, it turns on all the learning centers in your brain, allowing you to adapt to the world in a different way. We found that there are ways you can train your brain to be able to become more positive. In just a 2-minute span of time, done for 21 days in a row, we can actually rewire your brain, allowing your brain to actually work more optimistically and more successfully. We've done these things in research now in every single company that I've worked with, getting them to write down 3 new things that they're grateful for 21 days in a row, 3 new things each day. And at the end of it, their brain starts to retain a pattern of scanning the world, not for the negative, but for the positive first. Journaling about one positive experience you've had over the past 24 hours allows your brain to relive it. Exercise teaches your brain your behavior matters. We find that meditation allows your brain to get over the cultural ADHD that we've been creating by trying to do multiple tasks at once, allows our brains to focus on the task at hand. And finally, random acts of kindness or conscious acts of kindness. We get people, when they open up their inbox, to write one positive email, praising or thanking somebody in their social support network. And by doing these activities and by training your brain, just like we train our bodies, what we found is we can reverse the formula for happiness and success. And in doing so, not only create ripples of positivity, but create a real revolution. Thank you very much.
Just a second here. Okay, so what we found was through the study by Julia Boehm and Sonia Lubermowski, they found 3 things contribute to chronic happiness. And the 3 things are one's set point, one's life circumstances, and the intentional activities in which one engages. So like Sean said in his presentation, you actually can change your trajectory towards happiness. I mean, they'll tell you that this is a little bit of a simplified chart, but if you look at it, you've got a lot of play in there for intentional activities, giving you a choice. So one intentional choice we can make is starting with self-care. So you get this message every time you start a flight. Did you ever really think about what this means in the rest of your life? The thing that I hear most from teachers is, I can't do one more thing. And I totally get that. I'm not here to suggest that you can do an hour of yoga every day or 30 minutes of meditation twice a day. Here's my big ask from you. And I'm hoping this is the one thing that you'll walk away with from today. Take 5 minutes. Now you're probably thinking, what is 5 minutes of anything going to accomplish? So I'll ask you, would you rather I give you $10.7 million or $1 million? Psychologist Benjamin Hardy found that most people would take the $1 million right now, as opposed to a penny that doubles in value over the course of the month. But what they might not realize is the doubling penny actually ends up being $10.7 million. But the majority of growth happens at the end, so most people aren't patient enough to wait for the big return. But what they're trying to show you is that little changes matter. James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits, excuse me, puts it like this. So here's how the math works. If you can get 1% better every day for a year, you'll end up 37 times better by the time you're done. Conversely, if you get 1% worse each day for a year, you'll decline nearly down to 0. So what are some of the things that you can choose to do for 5 minutes every day? You can start with breathing. So box breathing was developed for Navy SEALs to stay calm and focused, and therefore alive before and after combat. What's great about this technique is it has a neutral energetic effect. It's not going to charge you up or put you into a sleepy, relaxed state. It's just going to make you really alert and grounded and ready for action. So the nice thing about PD in your PJs, and please turn off your camera if you haven't, and this way you can have some privacy. We're going to have a few activities we're going to try tonight. We're going to try this right now. So if you're not sitting down, have a seat, and we're going to follow the breath bubble. So when it's expanding, you're going to breathe in for 4 seconds. Hold the air for 4 seconds while it's expanded, and then exhale for 4 seconds. Hold them empty for 4 seconds. So this is something very simple that you can do for 5 minutes. And I'll give you just a minute here to give it a try. So according to the Mayo Clinic, intentional deep breathing like this can actually calm your autonomic nervous system. It'll help you relax, it'll reduce your stress, and it can improve your mood. Another thing you can do is try is being mindful. So I found a bunch of fellow research nerd and happiness junkies at the Greater Good Science Center in Berkeley. They've got a ton of really good resources, articles, newsletters, and a podcast. They also have a sister site called Greater Good in Action, and it has dozens of wellness practices, including awe, compassion, connection, empathy, forgiveness, gratitude, happiness, kindness, and more. Some of these only take 5 minutes, and today we're going to try one called the self-compassion break. Pull that up here real quick. So this is Dr. Kristen Neff, and she studies self-compassion. And so you can just take a moment, get comfortable, and take a listen.
This practice is called the self-compassion break. And it's something you can do anytime during the day or at night when you need a little self-compassion. So to practice this exercise, we actually need to call up a little suffering. So I'd invite you to think about a situation in your life right now that is difficult for you. Maybe you're feeling stress, or you're having a relationship problem, or you're worried about something that might happen. I'd invite you to think of something that is difficult, but not overwhelmingly difficult, especially if you're new to practicing the self-compassion break. So finding the situation and getting in touch with it. What's going on? What happened? Or what might happen? Who said what? Really bring the situation to life in your mind's eye. And then I'm going to be saying a series of phrases that are designed to help us remember the three components of self-compassion when we need it most. So the first phrase is, this is a moment of suffering, right? We're bringing mindful awareness to the fact that suffering is present. And I'd invite you to find some language that speaks to you. Something like, this is really hard right now. Or, I'm really struggling. We're actually turning toward our difficulty, acknowledging it, naming it. This is a moment of suffering. The second phrase is, suffering is a part of life. Okay, we're reminding ourselves of our common humanity. Suffering is a part of life. And again, finding language that speaks to you. It may be something like, it's not abnormal to feel this way. Many people are going through similar situations. Right? The degree of suffering may be different, the flavor of suffering may be different, but suffering is a part of life, part of being human. And then the third phrase is, may I be kind to myself in this moment. And to support bringing kindness to yourself, I'd invite you to perhaps put your hands over your heart or some other place on your body that feels soothing and comforting. Feeling the warmth of your hands, the gentle touch, letting those feelings of care stream through your fingers. May I be kind to myself. And using any language that supports that sense of kindness. Perhaps language you would use with a good friend you cared about who was going through a very similar situation. You know, it may be something like, I'm here for you. It's going to be okay. I care about you. You can even try using a diminutive if that feels comfortable. You know, oh darling, I'm so sorry. Or you can try calling yourself by your first name. Anything that feels natural to express your deep wish that you be well and happy and free from suffering. And then letting go of the practice and Noticing how your body feels right now. Allowing any sensations to be just as they are. Allowing yourself to be just as you are in this moment.
So a few other tools that I like to use, you'll probably notice a theme here. I try to go for tools that are free to promote wellness for everyone. So Calm.com does have a lot of paid options, but they do have a few freebies. One of them that I like is the Calm add-on for Chrome. So you can limit your surfing with this particular part of the add-on. And then what's really nice too is if you find yourself mindlessly checking Facebook, you can block the website. They'll have nature scenes, breath bubbles similar to the one we used earlier, and some quick free meditations. So those are a nice option, and that's just a Chrome add-on. So another thing that you can do in 5 minutes or less is meditate. And studies have found that a regular meditation practice can actually change the shape of your brain. Neuroimaging studies show that after 8 weeks of meditation, meditators have increased gray matter density in their brain. You can actually see the results after only one session. Dan Harris, the author of 10% Happier and Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics, says that even 1 minute of meditation counts. And what I'm happy to share with you is that 10% is also offering their app and all the meditations in it for free for teachers as a thank you for all you're doing during the pandemic. So if you just go to 10%.com/care, there's like a 30-second form you can fill out for instant access. And then Headspace is also free for educators. And these are linked in my slides, and you'll get the bit.ly for that at the end. So let's try a really short meditation right now. Whoop. Lost my link. Okay. So another thing that we can do in 5 minutes or less is movement. And you can dramatically improve your health by moving. You can shoot for 22 minutes a day, but any movement that helps you stay physically active counts. So a writer from the New York Times called them Dr. Levine's magic underwear. They were bicycle shorts with built-in sensors, and they were how Dr. James Levine measured how his subjects moved in a study he led to find out how activity affects the body. And what he found that was, in his words, excessive sitting is a lethal activity. But the good news that came out of this and his other studies is that we don't really need to be Olympic athletes to benefit from movement. One study found that trading 2 minutes of sitting for 2 minutes of light intensity activity each hour, walking, cleaning, gardening, anything like that, lowered the risk of premature death by 33%. So let's see if I can get this one to go. So this is a movement. It's morning wake up, but this is a nice relaxing session for, oh, sorry about that. 1 second here, friends. Oh dear. I had this all dialed in and now it doesn't want to work for me. I'm very sorry, I'm having technical difficulties, so we're gonna move on. Okay, so what if I told you that you could avoid something that can contribute to hypertension, heart attack and stroke, weight gain and obesity, diabetes, depression and anxiety, faulty brain function, memory loss, immune system deficiency, decreased fertility, and psychiatric disorders? Would you want to know what it is? You're looking at it right here. It's sleep. So according to a study from Ball State University, school personnel are tired. So they found that 43% of educators slept an average of 6 hours or less each night, and that's far less than the 7 to 9 hours recommended for healthy functioning. Only 33% admitted to getting a good night's sleep most of the time. So what can we do? Keeping your room dark is essential to getting quality sleep. So what you want to do is you want to expose yourself to natural light during the day. Even 20 to 30 minutes of sunshine, just natural light. It doesn't even have to be a sunny day is enough. And then keeping your room as dark as possible at night can help your body produce enough melatonin, a hormone that promotes sleep. So what you want to make sure is that your room is completely dark. If you've got little lights, LED lights in your room, they sell stickers for those or type them over. You can get room darkening blinds or even a sleep mask, because light can be detected even through your closed eyelids, and that will mess with your sleep cycle. If you're going to go to Starbucks, do it early in the day. Caffeine consumption even 6 hours before bed can deprive you of more than an hour of sleep. And then if you've been up for more than 20 minutes and you can't sleep, leave your bedroom and do something quiet and boring to get sleepy. Don't sit in bed and try to go back to sleep. Usually most people find if they get up, relax, read for a while, and then get back in bed, they're usually able to sleep. And then power naps, it just depends. Some people say that if you're going to nap, you keep it 20 to 30 minutes max and earlier in the day. But other people find that daytime napping interferes with their good sleep. So just find out what works out best for you. So Brene Brown introduced me to the work of Stuart Brown, and they're not related. He moved from researching violence to researching play. And he found that the opposite of work is not play, it's really depression. And rather than defining it, he decided to create the 7 properties of play. The first one is time spent without any purpose. And Brene says for some folks, that's an anxiety attack. The second property is an activity you don't want to end, one that makes you lose track of time and you lose self-consciousness. So she talked about playing board games with her kids and talked about playing Candyland. Now, she said for her, that's not play, that's parenting, unless you really, really enjoy Candyland. Competition is also not play. In the animal world, they'll participate in contests. So they'll chase, they'll wrestle, things like that, but they'll handicap themselves in order to continue the activity. So think about your last vacation. How much of it was really play for you? How much was it play for your kids or for your significant other? So really think about when you're doing something for fun, who's having fun? And then how do I make this a regular thing? So how do I build in this 5 minutes every day to take care of myself? In co-pedagogy, Jennifer Gonzalez suggests pairing a part of your regular routine with a new self-care habit you'd like to integrate. So this idea that you can pair a new habit with an existing habit makes it easier to lock that new habit into place. So look for something that you already do automatically and integrate your self-care into that. So when you get in the car in the morning, put on your favorite song. And then if you do the same thing time after time, it creates almost this Pavlovian kind of response. And then, at the end of the day, you can, when you're done cleaning up dinner, you want to have a nice hot bath. That's another way that you can pair. When you pair things you have to do with things you want to do, you can make those new positive habits a little easier to integrate. So to wrap up for tonight, I wanted to tell you all, on Friday the 13th, when I found out schools were closing, I realized that I really wanted to do something to give back. As I've shared with a lot of you, it's really important to me that teachers take care of yourselves. You all give so much every day, and we tell our kids this all the time, right? You can't pour from an empty cup, but we do it all the time. So what I really wanted to do was create something to give back to all of you during this incredibly challenging time we're going through. So I created a wakelet called Care Package EDU, and I've been collecting as many resources as I can find to try to help support you. So a lot of the things I talked about tonight are in there. There's some other ones as well. Again, I really try to put the emphasis on things that are free, and I will keep adding to this as long as we are in the midst of this crisis. And I welcome you. If you are looking for a resource or you have a challenge that you're trying to overcome, please feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. I am happy to help direct you. I spend a lot of time curating resources for folks, so anything you're looking for, anything you need, I'm happy to help. I've got a few more slides here of some other things that you can check out for some self-care for yourself, but most of all, I just want to really thank you for taking the time for yourself tonight, and I hope that you are able to make this a regular part of your life moving forward. Just take 5 minutes every day, and we all benefit. So thank you very much for your time.
That was awesome. Thank you, Doreen, for sharing all that.
I just wanted to really thank you, Doreen. I think that it's great that you've really having taught for so many years, there are so